Hello, everybody. Welcome to the session. Can you hear me all right? Okay, so this is going to be an interesting session, and hopefully everybody will join it, and we're going to co-develop the recommendations for enhancing data impact through the governance and stewardship. And I have my co-chair, Douglas, Sarah, with me, and as well as the invited speaker, Jessica, NASA Jessica, and Shanna. Yes, Shanna. And also Emmanuel online. The agenda for the session is we're going to start with Sarah, provide some context for the session. Then we're going to have a presentation, assemble some the activity report, just give a little bit idea the community activities in the various perspectives. And then we're going to have a majority, the latter half of the session is the working session. We're going to split into 3 groups and working for 3 different perspectives. I'll talk a little bit more about that. First, we're going to have Sarah to welcome and provide a little bit feedback on what we're doing here, why we're doing it.
Hey, welcome to, this is our 3rd and final in a series of 3 summer ESIP sessions that are focused on how data governance or data governance across and within organizations and how that can help maximize the use of Earth science data. Can you hear me okay? Okay, cool. So I'm Sarah Lepkin. I'm the Science Data Operations Lead at NASA, and that means that I work with all the DACs, and I'm working on bringing the DACs, our 11 DACs, together into 5 sets and different cross-DAC teams. And one of the things that we're finding is incredibly important for bringing our organizations together, even within one organization, is data governance. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But these sessions started in 2024 when I think we were just thinking how can we work better with NOAA and USGS on data interoperability and wondering how data governance worked in each of those organizations. And so the 2024 session focused on the data governance efforts at NASA, NOAA, and USGS. And one thing we learned is that there's many different levels of data governance in organizations. And that makes it challenging to coordinate. Then last year, we discussed data governance efforts and needs within our own organizations. We did a fun brainstorming exercise and came up with a list of needs about what it would take to increase data governance at our organizations. And there was a report from that session that was published earlier this year. And I believe the link to that, Ping has put it in the notes. So it's there for anyone who's interested. And then this year, this is our final session, and we'll focus on the progress that people have made, organizations have made over the last couple of years. And then we'll end with another brainstorming exercise to help develop recommendations for data governance and interoperability. So that's the plan today.
So I should have introduced myself. My name is Payne and go with Payne. So I'm supporting the NASA ESTIS data governance activities. And today I'm going to give a brief report on the ESIP Data Stewardship Committee activities. From the 2024 session, one of the requests was to continue the activities we have started to focus on the cross-organizational interoperability. And we started with ESIP Data Stewardship Committee, and we have work on the collecting community stewardship practices and synthesize it and report them to the community. And what we've been doing is to collecting the stewardship practices in terms like the fair One is to have the persistent identifier practices, and another one is rich metadata. We also started with the data format, as well as control vocabularies. And we did one, so far we have 2 reports. The first one's on PID and the second one is on the rich metadata. And the second one just released it last Friday. And I do have the DOI there for both report if you're interested in that. And the next report we are focusing on is going to be the control vocabularies. And definitely welcome your participation when we start in September for next year. So highlight the outcomes for the report one, which is focused on the persistent identifiers. The DOI is the standard widely adapt method practice for the data sets as well as publications, and use of occurred for the people as well as to release the GitHub repositories to Zenodo to get the DOI for software. Those are emerging practices, and we found there are wild variations in maturity level in terms of the organizational adoption for the IGS, and that's for physical sample. Some are very mature, some are not mature at all. That's some of the high-level findings from the report one. For the report two, we have found that for the rich metadata, majority of the metadata schema that currently used for earth science capture the rich metadata. However, there's variations in the naming convention and also the required field or option field, and they are as they are adapted from the different standards and different schemas. So there's to kind of help that interoperability to cross different profiles. We have started develop the crosswalks using JSON, which is more machine interpretable the metadata profile to help. The focus is not so much on the pure complete the interoperability between the metadata schema, but it's more for the field that's considered as rich metadata for discovery citation. And as I mentioned, that we are moving on to the control vocabulary for next report. And now we're moving on to the next progress report on the organization's PID implementation. We have Emmanuel online. Emmanuel, take over, please.
Yes, thank you, Peng. I assume you can hear me, is that right?
We can hear you perfect.
Yes, excellent. So, so my name is Emmanuel Soling. I work in Germany for the Amos Association, and I'm tasked with organizing the metadata for the whole association, which in the field of Earth and Environment, which covers 7 centers, very kind of large centers, a couple of thousand employees. So it's a pretty big task. So I'm just going to report just the essentials. There's much more to it. It's not only PIDs. We're also covering semantics, interfaces, graphs, graph activities, and so on. But the PID activity is in particular interesting because it involves so many people, and because we try to use a strategy that go a little bit beyond of what traditional, how this traditional was approached. So across our centers, we agreed that our goal is to implement ORCID for organizations, as Peng just mentioned, ORCID for contributors, for people, RORs for organizations, instrument PIDs for instruments, IGSNs for samples, and respectively DOIs for publications and data sets. And the goal is to harmonize these information across our repositories and across our institutions to avoid redundancy of information, because currently we have all different kinds of versions of this information. And we want to effectively replace basically the monolithic metadata standards with PIDs, for more consistent systems and data exchange. So next slide, please. So this is kind of a very rough outline. So we have basically 4 steps that we go through, and the first one is to take a look at. We took a look at our centers and took a look at where does the information originate from, or where does the information about people, about instruments, about measurements, where do they enter our center? How is the information being dealt with within the center? What are the workflows that people use to store and transform the information from one tool to another? And how do we serve this information to the outside? So we want to basically standardize what goes outside to the outside, but of course we also want to standardize how these workflows work internally. However, from one center to another, these workflows are very different. So we have to solve them on a center basis, but the result needs to be the same for all of us. So so what we're doing is we're approaching different groups. So the libraries, for example, we work with the libraries. Of course, we work with the research data management groups. We work with the libraries, with the technicians, with the labs, but also, for example, with the administration, where a lot of the information is stored. Like, it's not only financial information, it's also information about people, it's information about what was acquired and where. All this information goes into some of these PID systems. So we don't treat our research data management as an individual task where researchers report to data managers who store the information in repositories. We take it as a community task where everybody has their little share of information that has to flow within the system into the repositories and then out into the world. So the next slide, please. The second step that we were looking at is, what do we expect from our stakeholders? Who are our stakeholders? As I mentioned, it's the organization itself, the administration, the repositories, people producing data, people, technicians working on these things, and what do we expect from them? This is actually a pretty tough step, because raising expectations means leadership. It means to need to talk to people, it needs to convince people to actually follow these kind of rules or policies that you're trying to implement. So I won't read all of this. I think you get the slides, but it's very important to raise these expectations and to clearly phrase what you expect from people, and to make clear that this will actually, that there's other stuff that they do not have to take care about. If they're taking care of their stuff, other people will take care of other stuff, and it will be easier for all of us. So next slide, please. So the third thing we need is an infrastructure that actually supports the policies and also supports the workflows. So we have to take a look at what kind of tools do we need? What do we have? Do we have an identity management? What kind of data does it support? What kind of information does it support? Do we have inventory management? Do we have a research information system? These are administrative tools that a lot of the administrations have, but are not connected to the data systems yet. Do we have instrument databases and electronic lab notebooks in place? Actually, even at Helmholtz, which we're not poor, but these things do not exist usually, because people are not yet used to digital workflows. And so we're basically taking a look and trying to see what is there, and then shaping our data ecosystem for our organization in order to support these workflows and the information that we want to support. So next slide, please. So what we're doing is, we're setting. So first of all, we did get a mandate from the management. So we do have from the top, the directors of the institutions, we do have a mandate to set these things up in the center. This is very important, because people who are supposed to go through a change, and this is kind of change management, they need to know that this change is wanted, that it's supported by the management. So this is the first thing we got. After explaining, of course, to the management what the benefit and what the consequences of all of this is. Now we did set up a planning group for each individual center, one after the other, which takes a look at where are the interfaces that we have to work with, who do we need to talk to, what kind of services do we need, what does our ecosystem look like, and so on. So we're mapping that in a kind of planning group, and then we're going into the individual groups for the individual PIDs to define the implementation, to take a look at who has the role, to again raise the expectations to these people, and then basically get these things done. And then we prepare the documentation. This is also, it's very, very important, is to document everything so we can go center by center and we can learn one center by and after another what went well, what went wrong, how can we do better, and how do we actually make sure that the result in the end is harmonized. So next slide, please. Currently, we have been talking to all the centers. We have the mandate. All the data management groups are aware of what's going to happen, and we're starting, as I said, center by center. So we have a general documentation, in Excel sheets, about what kind of policies do we have? How do the centers treat the different PIDs currently? How do they treat ORCIDs? Who is responsible? Where does it appear? Which tools actually are currently supporting that? Which tools do we need to adapt? So they do support that. Who uses RORs? Who uses instrument PIDs? So we have documented that for 2 of our 7 centers. We are actually implementing currently ORCID and ROR in one center together with the library administration and the RDM group. And the interesting thing is that even the administration is aware of these things. That I was very surprised by that. But talking to them, they were already keeping RORs for the organizations that they'll be dealing with partly. So that's actually sometimes you open doors that are already there, and that was actually quite surprising. So we're also planning for the data ecosystems with 5 centers to take a look at which tools are there and which ones do we need. They're already using a lot of tools, and so we're evaluating the tools and ecosystems that are there, and we're documenting the progress and solutions and our agreements, kind of our internal agreements, also to publish them and use them for the broader community. Next slide, please. Okay, some very brief experiences that we've made on this way. First of all, communicate as much as possible, of course, but that's the hardest part. To talk to people, to tell them what you expect from them, to make sure, to answer their concerns, because they all have concerns. That's what you need a good narrative for. You need a story, that contains all the whys, and this will not work, and we have tried it, but it never worked. You need answers to that. Otherwise, they will not follow you. So a good narrative is really very, very important. We are looking at services to federate services, because we will not be able to use all services on everybody at the same time. So we need to use services that we can use across the center. So federation across the organization is very important. We need to build and know our data ecosystem. As I said, many people are already using tools that they have developed. They want these tools in a broader application, of course. So we need to take a look at how can we do that, and that, do they support workflows? Do they have interfaces to connect to other tools and so on? We need to support data standards and provide interfaces for the workflows. We need to take a look at that the PIDs are part of the administrative tools where we need them. We need training and information material, also very important, so people can look up stuff. They don't need to know everything, but they need to know what they need to know, in order to perform their jobs. And that's why kind of tailored information material is very, very important. Of course, yes, I said we need to document what we do. We need to make sure that we are working with very different centers. And we need to harmonize not the internal processes, but the outcome. The outcome needs to be harmonized. How it works internally honestly, I don't care. As long as the outcome is harmonized and we get harmonized information to the outside. And yeah, another very interesting lesson for me is that the administration that I personally was afraid of most, because they tend, to react only to what the really top, when they get direct orders by the directors or by their superior, they were very, very open, and because they're used to organize information. It's kind of their core core expertise, So they were actually very, very helpful, at least, in my center and also in some other centers. And obviously, young people are more likely to accept digital workflows than older colleagues. So if you want to do change, start with the young ones. That also worked quite well for us. So I think that's my last slide. And thank you very much for having me here.
Thank you, Emmanuel, for excellent progress report.
Yeah, while we're waiting. Hi, everyone. I'm Jessica Burnett. I'm a program executive at NASA headquarters. So I support Katie Baines in several things, some of which include some activities that go on at ESDIS, which is anyone unfamiliar with ESDIS in this room? So ESDIS is basically one of the largest Earth data archives on the planet. And the ESDIS project is the one who oversees and stewards that data for us in the archive. ESDIS is one of many projects run by our Earth Data Officer, or my boss, and it's a big part of what we do. So thank you for having me, Peng, and others. So I wanted to really briefly go over what are currently the NASA Science Mission Directorate's science data governance principles. You can read them here, but I'll briefly highlight that there's a focus currently and moving forward on practical governance activities that, of course, enable science or organizational value. We're aiming to streamline governance in whatever ways we can to achieve desirable outcomes, not only at the level of our Science Mission Directorate, which is above NASA Earth, but also in our divisions below, which includes NASA Earth Science Division. The aim is to be collaborative, of course, minimize friction, and come up with really creative and measurable governance outcomes wherever we can. So this is currently the approach of the Science Mission Directorate at NASA. So within the Science Mission Directorate, we have the Office of the Chief Science Data Officer. So this is one step above NASA's Earth Science Division. And I want to just really highlight what's relevant to this group in terms of, not our hierarchy isn't the best word, but in terms of the different, what did Sarah call it earlier, levels of governance that can sometimes cause friction or be annoying to some folks. So under our Chief Science Data Officer, among other things, is our Core Data and Computing Board. Within that, there's a governance team, and all the governance policies and guidance that comes down from our Chief Science Data Officer will flow to our individual science data officers. So for us in Earth, that would be Katie Baines, our Earth Data Officer for the Earth Science Division. And then from there, each of our science divisions, including Earth, Planetary, others, will work with their data repository stewards. Some of the current data governance initiatives coming out of that Chief Science Data Office include coming up with governance lexicon. So I think everyone in this room is probably familiar, just developing definitions for governance terms, identifying synonyms, et cetera. Overall, managing the data management lifecycle, so developing these baseline lifecycle phases with definitions and phase level purpose statements, and what are the minimum requirements per phase and the lifecycle line roles that we need to carry those out. The third initiative is minimum metadata elements. So identifying a core set of metadata that's required to improve not only discovery, but also quality of searching and finding our data. And then finally, developing a decision tree that will aid the Chief Science Data Office in deciding where data should go or be archived within NASA or externally. So this is one of many things coming out of the Chief Science Data Office's data governance group. This is the governance knowledge hub. I personally haven't worked with it. Really, the folks in the room who are with NASA ESDIS will be much more able to speak to it. And we have someone from the Chief Science Data Office, Steve, as well, who might be able to chat with you a little bit more about this. But I wanted to highlight this as one of the many activities coming out of the governance at the Science Mission Directorate level. So let's step down from the Chief Science Data Office to where I sit, which is the Earth Science Division. and under which ESDIS sits. So our Chief Science Data Officer recently released what we're calling the Earth Data Intelligence Strategy. This is just our strategy for how we plan to tackle isn't the best word, but I'll use it, tackle AI and make sure that it's working for us and to support the further development of AI resources and uses within our division and archive. And I'll just highlight one quote that I think highlights the relevance to this group. So that is policies, review processes, metadata requirements, and interoperability standards ensure consistency and trust across everything we build. I don't think that this is a new statement for us and won't be so shocking to anyone in this room, but it really highlights the emphasis on these on this within this intelligence strategy. So I'll briefly just say that the strategy really comprises four main pillars. The first is infrastructure. The second is production. The third is access, which includes semantic search and discovery interfaces. And then finally, analysis. And across all of those pillars, we have these two cross-cutting capabilities, right? We have the governance and standards, and then we have operational intelligence. And operational intelligence here is really just AI-assisted monitoring, performance metrics, things like that. And please do visit our webpage, which has the strategy right on it. And briefly, and Sarah Lubkin and Peng and Steve, who may be in the room as well, can speak a little bit more to what's going on at ESDIS with respect to data governance. I'm sure that some folks in this room have heard that things are shifting in the ESDIS world at NASA. And I just want to dispel you of, or disabuse you of any thoughts that that's not a good thing, is a great thing. And I'll just say that the way that you engage with us, with NASA, with the archive, with the folks in ESDIS and across our program is not going to change. Meanwhile, things are changing in the background to really catch up to the current standards and modernization. So anyways, I wanted to highlight the very new and I think really exciting fact that ESDIS just stood up. How long ago? Okay, so pretty much just stood up the new ESDIS Data Governance Board. Sarah Lubkin is the civil servant lead at the ESDIS project. But really, if you have questions or want to learn a little bit more, I'd go to Peng or Steve Olding. Peng, of course, is here. And so this group is entirely comprised of internal folks. However, as the board continues to grow and develop and refine its objectives, there will be future opportunities for external folks to engage, inform the board activities, inform the ESDIS project, et cetera. So I'm really excited about that. And that's all I have for NASA. So if you have questions, please let me know.
Yeah, thanks everyone for having me. I'm Shannon Leslie. I'm at the National Snow and Ice Data Center. But I'm also supporting the ESDIS project. And I'll talk just briefly about sort of my experiences, our experiences on this team. It's a cross ESDIS team of metadata stewards. Who are we? So we do have over 20 members. So we have members across all of ESDIS, so all of the DACs, but we have stewardship represented across all the science disciplines. So the science spheres, so there's atmosphere, biosphere, cryosphere, hydrosphere, and geosphere. So expertise across all of those science disciplines. But our folks also have experience just in operational metadata curation. So, publishing data products regularly, publishing metadata. We have folks with expertise in the sort of enterprise or ESDIS enterprise systems and schemas. And of course, folks involved in the broader community like ESIP and others. So how we work, this is a pretty high level view of what our team does, but we do have a very collaborative model of working. So we use like consensus-based decision making. And really, I think we've, Jessica hinted at it, others like around a lot of the change that's happening. So right, historically for decades, we've been operating under really supporting our specific communities, but our team, we're really trying to focus more on the cross ESDIS priorities. And I think we are a pretty practical outcome oriented team. And in terms of what we do, so again, high level, but we're developing metadata best practices. We do a lot of coordinated curation. I would say we do a lot of metadata archive management. As you can imagine, NASA Earth Science metadata archive is large. And so we do a lot of trying to keep that archive sort of up to date as standards evolve. Thereby improving metadata quality. And we've sort of been talking a lot about governance in the talks thus far. So we are doing sort of our part at the team level and advancing some governance. And integration here, I mean, like we're sort of working across all of these different ESDIS organizations to ensure that our workflows are consistent, and just our curation, generally our practices are integrated. So I'm just going to jump into like what's gone well. So really we have sort of what's gone well and what this has enabled. So I think our expertise is really like our superpower. I think the collaborative model has worked really well, and treating metadata stewardship as a sustained capability, not like an ephemeral project, is really important. So we can really maintain that expertise. We're consistent as we develop our practices and standards through time. We employ a lightweight governance sort of model with transparent, I mentioned, consensus-based decision-making. We try to develop clear roles, including distributed leadership on the team. And also we've aimed to align our team member participation with like the actual capacity available at the organizations, right? So we try to be a bit flexible there. And really importantly is like sharing knowledge and tools and workflows, and even workloads across organizations, right? So even operational responsibilities has worked really well. And this has all enabled like higher quality metadata. I'll emphasize like not only just interoperable, right? We're all like working in the same sort of enterprise systems, but we're still maintaining that rich scientific diversity that, right, is again, I think, Earth Science NASA superpower. But, this has also enabled greater consistency, trust, and adoption of these like, ESDIS enterprise priorities, as well as adopting like the change that's occurring across the organization. And I think this is also giving us a good foundation that can adapt to even more change. But what we're still learning. So, I mean, I think everybody would agree with this. So sustaining participation and progress when people either leave, turnover occurs, or, we have a lot of folks who are kind of spread, peanut butter spread across multiple projects and that sort of thing. So limited fractional allocations. I think we've made a lot of progress in embedding metadata stewardship into the actual like system and tool development. But I think we still have a ways to go there as well. I mean, this is how we make our tools and systems actually interoperable and make sure that they support the science diversity that is so important to us. And I think just navigating like the different cultures, the different contracts across organizations, that is, and the contractual responsibilities across organizations is challenging for us. And harmonizing metadata practices across diverse organizations. So this is, right, we've had decades of experience of sort of supporting our individual science disciplines, and trying to harmonize that, is something we're still, learning. And then last but not least is sort of measuring the impact of the work that we're doing on like downstream tools and applications. So like, is what we're working on, does it matter? Where does it matter? So like observability metrics, right? And this will just allow us to better like prioritize our investments. And I think that's all I've got. Thanks.
Thanks for all the presenters. Hopefully that give you some sense what's going on various different front. And now we're going to move on to the main part of the session. That's the working session to set the context for the working session. This is the framework that has developed from last year's session and from the feedback on the challenges and the solutions on the data governance related to interoperability, and has emerged this framework that has the three thematic areas. One is the governance and the leadership that touch on the provide directions and define accountabilities, and also secure resources. And another part is technical infrastructure and standards that touch on the tools used and developed and the formats, data formats, metadata formats, and standards and the frameworks. And the third one is culture and organizational practice. So we're pretty surprised when we were talking about data governance interoperability and the various aspects, almost like a whole landscaping needs to come together to make this work. So what we're going to do today is to, based on those particular areas, and we're going to try to develop the recommendations. So we talk about the pain point and solutions in the past, and now we will say what we can make recommendations on solving the challenges that identified within this area. So we're going to split the people in the room into three groups. And on this part, we're going to have governance and the leadership. And in the middle, we're going to work on the technical infrastructure and standards. And in that area, we're going to have a culture and organization practices. So if you have access to the Google Doc, the session Google Doc, and there's a developed space for each area. So the group, when you, it's kind of hard to make one big group, but for example, this area, I'm not forcing you to wait for the governance part. You can move to different region if you want to focus on the governance leadership in this area. And technical infrastructure standards is in the middle. The culture and organization practice, which is focused on the people, behavior, communication, and collaborations. So we'll have time for like 45 minutes.
Sorry for people online. I started talking with unmute the microphone. And thanks for coming back. And then we are trying to wrap up the paper. And if you go to the shared notes documents that has a specific section, where is that section? It's here, right? In the closing remarks section that if you're interested, please leave your name and contact information. We will involve everyone who are interested in contributing to the paper writing later. And Penn already left her name and in there. And so that's just an example to show. Yeah. And I want to also give a huge shout out to Sarah has been championing this efforts, and then Penn spent a lot of time coordinating in the past 2 years cross agencies, and Emmanuel joining us like since last year, and then contributing a lot in the development of framework as well. And thanks Madeline for supporting the session today. And then huge shout out to everyone who has been in this session actively participating in the discussion. So with that, I think we are right on time, or maybe a minute over. And so thanks everyone for joining today. And then please enjoy the coffee before the next session.
I want to take the opportunity to thank everybody again, and also my co-chairs and invited speakers. So if you're interested, please continue to work in the Google Doc. So we'll keep that open. And when you have any ideas, offline or for after another section, and I will appreciate it, all the feedback we can get. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Beng, for hosting this. This was great.
Thanks, Emmanuel.